delay we use. So you say there's a race of men in the trees. You're for tough legislation. Thanks for calling. Wait all night for calls like these.
Somebody was making a little joke, not even mentioning this song to me, but just on a Facebook thread that I think had something to do with one of these Ask or Tell Me Anything shows. And I suddenly thought, oh, yeah. I mean, under this rubric, I'm the day fly, which doesn't sound quite as romantic. But whatever. I can be the day fly. I can live with that. I really always did want, I worked for 16 years in commercial radio. And I thought it would be, it would sort of wreck my life, I knew. But to have one of those overnight shows where you, like Art Bell kind of shows, where, he was the apex of those shows, if that's the right word. He was either the apex or the nadir of these shows, coast to coast. Just having the people who are up late, they call about different things. Let's just leave it at that. But I sort of thought, I would like that. I would like that subject matter. And I like the idea of sitting in a, studio booth like this one at 3 a.m. or something and talking to some guy in Nebraska. But I wouldn't want to be up at 3 a.m. That's the problem. There is a whole sort of romance to that whole idea. But then basically you're up at a time when nobody else is awake. And then you're going to sleep during the day and your life will quickly go downhill. So, anyway, we are going to do Ask or Tell Me Anything. We already know that there's a race of men in the trees. You don't have to call up about that, but you can if you want. Or you could just do the Calvino spin on that, the Baron in the trees. Anyway, 888-720-WNPR, 888-720-9677 from the foot of Mount Malzoni. We are taking your calls. It's Ask or Tell Me Anything. And yes, and remember we established 2 weeks ago, on this day 2 weeks ago, we established that your call, the subject of your call may not amount to a hill of beans. And that's okay. It can be several inches below the average height of a hill of beans, and you'll still be fine. Joining us now is Del from Meriden. Hi, Del.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
Just fine. How are you?
Great. I wanted to talk about electric cars. So I'm on my second one. I started with a 2013 Nissan Leaf, which was 5 years old when I bought it. And now I've got a Chevy Bolt EUV. And, I did it for environmental purposes, but also, I just think it's actually the Bolt actually is a good financial thing. Most electric cars are pretty expensive, and I don't want to sound like I'm making a commercial for Chevy Bolt, but it's like the good deal in cars.
Right. The prices are dropping overall for electric cars. I think they're kind of down 20% across the board. I think the average price now is $53,000, which is a lot. That's a lot for a car. You paid less than that for your Chevy Volt.
Right. Yeah, I think I paid $31,000, and then I get the $7,500 federal credit.
Yeah.
And another $2,200 from the state. So it gets down to we're talking $22,000 is what I end up paying.
Right. Also, there's a thing where you just write to Al Gore and he sends you a $50 bill. So you should do that too.
Right.
It's terrific.
Right.
So I have to ask you a question. I'm assuming your current model has the non-Tesla plug, right?
Right.
So so there's for people who haven't been following this, there's sort of two kinds of plugs. There's the Tesla plug and there's the non-Tesla plug. And what seems to have happened is, well, in the infrastructure bill, the money is specifically designated for the non-Tesla plug. There are actual names for these two kinds of plugs, but it wouldn't make any difference to say them. So there's sort of a scenario. And meanwhile, a lot of the major automakers, I'm not sure about Chevy, but starting 2024, 25, they're going to move over to the Tesla plug. Because right now, if you drive across the country, I'm pretty sure there's more charging stations that accommodate Tesla plugs than the other kind. But we're as usual, we've done a wonderful thing in trying to transition to EVs, and we're going to get there. But we've managed to do it in a fairly scattershot and complicated way, where there are two competing charging systems that are incompatible with one another, and one of which is going to be proliferating with federal money. The other one is probably going to turn out to be the state of the art, right? The Tesla plug is eventually going to eat everything else. But it's just like if you want to drive out to the West Coast right now, it's just a really complicated thing, I think.
Right. It's complicated unless you own one of the fast charging cars.
Right.
Like a Tesla is relatively, not compared to going to the gas station, but the Tesla and I think the Hyundai Ioniq, those charge quickly.
So
Chevy Bolt, they've taken the approach, we want to protect this battery at all costs.
Right.
So we're going to make a slow charging. But
so the thrust of your message to America right now, if I understood your original comment, is you don't have to buy the sexier and more expensive EV. And if that's getting in your way, you should look at maybe one of the things that are maybe a little less sexy sounding.
Yes. And actually, going to your point about the Tesla chargers, Tesla is actually slowly testing out converting, adding a charging connection that other cars can use.
Right. And that would be the best thing, would be to have chargers that could be used, interchangeably with both kinds of systems. That would be the smart thing to do, because a lot of cars like yours, they're going to stay on the road. Your car is not going anywhere. It doesn't make any difference if a lot of the big automakers convert in 24 or 25. Your car is still going to need charging stations, and so will many, many, many others. I'm going to just have to move on here, but really interesting call. Thanks for that. We seem to be thinking about climate change and stuff like that. So here's Anthony in New Haven. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Colin. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I've noticed lately, I've been reading a lot of, media coverage about heat waves and, the wildfires and so forth. And I've noticed that they tend to pretty quickly pivot to sort of almost implicitly making or trying to persuade the holdouts that climate change is real. And, this seems to me to be a mistake in the sense that, we're trying to persuade the unpersuadable. And the other thing is that I think in some ways it kind of legitimizes the point of view of people who deny climate change because we're kind of, spending a lot of time and effort trying to persuade them and treat them as if they could be persuaded and as if they're reasonable. So, I'm curious what your take is on that.
Well, I mean, once again, I'd want to look at some, halfway decent polling on this before I said anything dispositive. But typically with an issue like this, it can be a mistake to assume that there are two hardened off opposing positions and no liminal space between the two of them. Typically, there are persuadables. And let me give you an example, like a real life example where I can show you persuadables and people who change their minds and stuff. And it's on my mind because I believe it's Thursday. Our sibling program where we live is doing a thing involving climate change, and I think specifically involving meteorologists. They're going to have at least a local meteorologist on to talk about it. And she's somebody who takes climate change seriously and includes it in, as a factor in her weather forecasts. 10 years ago, a mere 10 years ago, meteorologists were a big problem. I mean, like TV meteorologists were a big problem. A lot of them didn't believe in climate change, thought they understood the science better than the climate scientists. In fact, there was one scholarly study of this that polling them and kind of analyzing them and kind of came up with the theory that because they were science oriented, they thought that they understood the science better than the climate scientists. So you really had a lot of people, the people who had the most access to the most eyes and ears in the American public to talk about climate were, I think, disproportionately weighted into the climate skeptic category 10 years ago. That's obviously really, really changed drastically. And so that's an example of a group of people who changed their minds, or some of them just aged out of the profession and were replaced by young people who would like a habitable planet. But I mean, I think there's potential for change. And I don't know what the best means of achieving that change is. And you're absolutely right that there are people in, they're just sort of the Vivek Ramaswamis of this world who, my jaw just dropped on Wednesday night when he said climate policy is a hoax. And he says, what did he say? We've got to frack, drill, and burn coal and do nuclear. And I'm thinking, wow, and you've got like 20% in some of the polls. But there was also that anguished moment where the panelists were asked to raise their hands if they believed in human agency in causing climate change, and no hands went up. I watched that. And I think actually they were sort of a little confused, or maybe, as people tend to do, waiting to see who else's hand went up. And then suddenly DeSantis said, "Stop treating us like children." I know how to treat children. I tell them things about American history that aren't true. And so I don't know. And then Haley actually said, no, climate change is real, and then talked a little bit about it in a grown-up way. So I'm getting off your track, but I think it's worth it. That's the answer I have. I think it's worth it. If we think of the climate skeptics as a 100% group of their own, if you can peel off 15% of those people, put them in the other camp, that's worth doing.
Well, Colin, but here's my other point. Let's say that we do get everybody on board. I mean, that's not, a panacea. I mean, in other countries, they do have everybody on board, and they're really not doing much. I mean, so, I think there's a little bit of a, false hope that once we get everyone on board that we're actually going to seriously tackle this problem, when I'm not so sure that that's the case.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you got to tackle the problem no matter how many people you've got on board. And I think we have enough people on board to do some meaningful things. Just consider the first call that we took today. But I know what you're saying. I guess we're a little bit different about that. I sort of feel like if you can, add a few people. I think what's basically going to happen, I was watching that debate, and even though I thought the raise your hand thing, it really wasn't quite as bad as the way that it was reported. I think a number of them would have put their hands up. But I still, if I were the Democrats, I would make an ad. I would make a lot of ads out of that. And then I would make sure those ads were seen by people between the ages of, let's say, 18 and 34. Because this issue, although, I mean, if you have half a brain, it tracks pretty powerfully with you no matter how old you are. It's really important among young voters. And I would particularly target people between the ages of 18 and 34 who are maybe on the fence about voting at all. Because I think here is why you have to vote. And here is how you have to vote. All right. We're going to keep moving along here. We've got Bill. I'm looking at the board right now, and it says Mike, Anthony, Charlie, Bill, Matt, John. We love all you guys, but where are the women? Why are the women not calling up today? So women out there, 888-720-WNPR. Women tend to be a little less enthusiastic about talk radio until, like calling in to a talk radio show, until they have the wonderful experience that they typically have here. It's life-changing, and then they're fine. All right, so Bill, you have the floor right now. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Colin. The question I got for you is, you were talking to an alien, and you had to get together in about an hour. They said, "Yeah, meet me in an hour to the alien." The alien's going to be like, "How long is that?" How do you explain to an extraterrestrial how long an Earth hour is?
I think the first thing I would say to the extraterrestrial was, you mean you made it all the way here, which was really, really difficult, and you don't know how long an hour? You didn't even do any prep? Like, is there anything that you studied on the trip over here? That's the first thing I would say. But I'm dodging your question.
Okay.
So time and the measurement of time is sort of a semi-human construct that, is pinned to astronomical activities and revolutions of the Earth and stuff like that. But then you sort of see the fact that we do things like daylight savings time, that we have time zones and things like that. And you realize, wow, a lot of this stuff is in fact the creation of the human mind, trying to understand its reality and organizing it in geographical and chronological segments. So I would say, what would I say? I would say to the alien, the extraterrestrial, if you've got like one episode of Matlock on your ship, watch that, okay? Watch that. That's how long it is before. First of all, like if we're going to meet an hour from now, just watch an episode of Matlock, and then you have to meet me right after that. That's probably.
Right. I think the alien would say, yeah, if I don't know how long an hour is, I'm probably not familiar with Matlock either, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I like the answer. Thank you.
I think you'd find that Matlock is very well understood and frequently referenced in civilizations in other parts of the universe. I think you're going to find that Matlock is a pretty universal symbol of time and human activity. That's just me. So with that in mind, all of these things look kind of interesting. And I think I'm going to go to, because we just talked about Matlock, I'm going to go to John in Wallingford and then possibly to Matt, and then we'll take a break. All right, here we go. John, you've got the floor now.
Yeah, hi, Colin. It's Don, actually, D-O-N. But
sorry about that.
Anyway, no problem. I think that was Jonathan's mistake. I'm a second-time caller, and I have two, not exactly questions, but items that I think will test the lower limits of size of a hill of beans. So my first one has to do with my call a few weeks ago, the punchline of which was the Native American in True Grit was Jay Silverheels.
Right.
Jonathan remembered that. So anyway, I was thinking of my old friend David Johansen the other day, best known for
the New York Dolls. Yeah.
And then he went on to form another group called the Harry Smiths.
And then what was the character? Was it Buster Poindexter? Wasn't he Buster Poindexter?
Buster Poindexter is exactly right.
Okay.
Yep. So for no apparent reason, I decided to look at the Wikipedia page of Jay Silverheels. Guess what his real name was? You're right, Harry Smith.
I'm not putting all this together. What does it all mean?
It doesn't mean anything, but I think it's amazing that I thought of my David Johansen, Harry Smith, look up Jay Silverheels, and his real name is Harry Smith. I had no idea that was.
It would have been so much better if Jay Silverheels' real name had been Buster Poindexter. Then you would be the call of the day. You would be You would be like the guy who called 2 weeks ago to talk about how rabbits don't like carrots. But I don't know if Harry Smith is going to get you there. By the way, we're going to introduce a new feature today. We're not going to do it right now because we're busy. We might be busy the whole time. I don't know what will happen to our feature, but but I want to have have a feature on Ask or Tell Me Anything called the Asteroid of the Day, and so we'll name it'll be a real asteroid too. This has nothing to do with astronauts. There is no astronaut of the day, and there's not going to be, but because we don't allow astronauts on the show. Although we can talk about astronauts, but I wouldn't really see the point of having an astronaut of the day. But we're going to have an asteroid of the day, and I've already chosen it, and that'll happen later. All right. What it says, I now know, I now realize what he's talking about. Matt from Woodbridge, here you have the floor. Go ahead. Bring up your topic.
Yeah, the question is, have you heard of this character called the Bronze Age Pervert?
Yeah, the Bronze Age. Yeah, go ahead. You go first.
No, you go ahead. That was my only question. I have some comments, but yours will be probably way more interesting than mine.
I don't know about that, but I floated to my producers a long, long time ago, like, I don't know, a year and a half ago maybe, the idea of doing a show on the manosphere. Now, the manosphere, which includes the Bronze Age Pervert, and shows like Fresh and Fit, and then there's the guy who died, I forget, Kevin Samuels, maybe? Could that be his name? But anyway, in the manosphere, there's this whole really sort of kind of backwards-looking reverse feminist attitude that has to do with what women are really here on Earth for and what men are here on Earth for, and kind of hyper-traditional looks at that, and also various, I don't know, kind of loaded understandings of what constitutes attraction between a man and a woman and how important status and assets are and all this kind of stuff. And it's all a little, it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. It seems like it has at least a partial grip on the hand of incels to a certain degree. But it's out there. And my guess is that it's more persuasive than people realize. And oddly enough, since we're sitting here in Connecticut right now, the show Fresh and Fit, which is very popular on YouTube, Fresh is a guy from New Britain, Connecticut originally. They're down based in Miami now and stuff like that. But this is a guy who grew up in New Britain, Connecticut. I'm blocking his actual real name right now. But what did you want to say about Bronze Age Pervert?
Well, I just finished the Atlantic article by a guy named Graham who claimed to have met him. And so I kind of went deep into the character and this kind of Nietzschean philosophy of the fact that, liberal democracy has failed us. It kind of reduced us to a least common denominator. And it seems like there's arguments that are being articulated on the kind of intellectual left and on the quasi-intellectual right that are both kind of making this claim that the democratic, the experiment is kind of coming to an end and that we're preparing for the next phase. I don't know if that's true or not. I thought it was interesting, and I was wondering if anyone else connected the dots, that there's these extreme arguments on both the left and right that are kind of fighting against this idea of the status quo neoliberal normal.
Right. We did do a show about this to a certain degree. It was the show we did, I think, earlier this year or maybe last year on what's called conspirituality, because conspirituality is an element of what you're talking about. There is a place kind of on the other side of the moon, so to speak, where the far right and the far left meet and they shake hands. And it turns out that the nice woman on the yoga mat next to yours in yoga class also listens to Joe Rogan, and she started to hear some people who really make a lot of sense to her. And there's that whole thing. And I would also join to what you're saying right now, and I can direct people to a Council on Foreign Relations piece about this that dropped in January of 2022, something called accelerationism. Accelerationism is sort of, and it's very much priced into the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys and people like that. That idea that there is the kind of decline happening that you're talking about, and the best thing to do is accelerate it, get it over with, burn it down, and then build back up again. And I think the fact that there are people out there who not only would believe that and talk about it on a subreddit or something, but might actually act upon those ideas should scare us a little bit. I'll throw it back to you, and then we'll go to a break. Oh, he's not there anymore. Oh, are you there? You are there. Yeah. Did you want to respond to that at all?
I was just saying, does this relate at all to Trumpism?
Well, yes. Yes.
Is Trump this ubermensch in a Nietzschean way who's kind of representing what the culture should be, and people are latching onto him as a symbol?
What I think is Trump is the sort of mainstream capitalist Coca-Cola version of accelerationism and the manosphere and all this. These fringe movements suddenly found this kind of, he's just kind of a walking logo, and you can start attaching various things to that logo. And he doesn't tend to resist. It's like, I will. It goes back to Charlottesville, right, where he said, there are some very nice people on both sides, and I mean, he was unwilling to condemn that there. And it's clear that if there are people who think, well, I can associate my views with you better than I can with any other mainstream politicians. You are the mainstream brand of the weird thing that I like, the extreme thing that I like. I mean, I don't think Trump really has a lot of core beliefs. I think he has a lot of applause lines. And if there's some aspect of that can get him applause, he will do it and he will say it until somebody tells him to stop doing it or he'll get arrested. I mean, I sort of wonder, and by the way, I should say, then we have to go to break. There's two things happening today out in the real world, which I wasn't sure would come up because we tend to talk about esoteric things here on Ask Her Tell Me Anything. But in the in the sort of the Jack Smith January 6th case, Judge Chulkin has set a date. It's March 4th. That is, there was a hearing today in her court. That's a huge setback for Trump. And just reading kind of fairly loose, high-speed accounts of the hearing today, in which, as you may know, the Trump lawyers had suggested, Jack Smith had suggested sometime in early January of next year. And the Trump lawyers had suggested probably what would be a little bit more convenient is if this happened right around the time that the sun runs out of hydrogen. That's when they would like to have this hearing. I think they wound up proposing sometime in 2026. I know they did. So is 2026 good for you? And Judge Chulkin said, no, that's ridiculous. She said that Smith's time was too soon. She set March 4th as the date. But that represents a defeat of all the arguments that they were putting up there. And she made a lot of interesting points, including the fact that, it's already 3 years and change since the actual events, the attempt to overturn the election results. It's ridiculous. It would be ridiculous to wait a full 5 years. And she says, what happens then is that people's memories start failing or witnesses die or whatever. It really just gets way too hazy, that they're about as far out as they really want to go. And then the other thing that she has made clear, and I don't know if it was in her remarks today, because this is all happening kind of nowish or this morningish, but with Trump, because in fact he is prone to making public utterances that can either taint the jury pool or try to intimidate witnesses, she doesn't want to give him a lot of time. And she's kind of made that clear. Like, the more time I give you, the more time you do stuff that I don't want to have happen in a trial I'm trying to run. So there's sort of that aspect. And then the other thing that's happening today that is totally unexpected, and I think it's over too, is that in the Fulton County case, Mark Meadows is petitioning to move that to federal court. There's some complicated reasons why he wants to do that. But in the course of this hearing today, he very unexpectedly took the stand. And I listen to a lot of shows, kind of obsessively, podcasts with legal experts and stuff like that, who I think all of whom thought that there was no chance of doing this. Typically, you don't take the stand because then you can be cross-examined. I believe this means that Meadows' team decided, along with Meadows, that the risk of being tried in Georgia, the harm of being tried in Georgia in a Fulton County courtroom, was so high that it would be worth any risk that he engendered by giving testimony today. So that tells you something as well, if that's the correct interpretation. All right, we're way over the time limit. We've got to take a break. The aliens are coming in 27 minutes as soon as they finish Matlock. So let's get going here.
You're the wave upon my ocean, pounding rhythm in motion. It's a full moon kind of night, yeah. I don't want to go home yet. You can question my devotion. Wear my heart on my shoulder. Just relax and let the riptide pull you close. Baby, all I wanna do is coast. I told every little star how sweet I think you are. Why haven't I told you? I've told ripples in a brook, made my heart an open book. Why haven't I told you? Friends ask me if I'm in love. I always answer yes. Might as well confess.
I'll tell a quick story here. So I don't have any notes in front of me about this, so I may get some of the details wrong. But Jerome Kern, who wrote the music to this song, is going for a walk in New York, and he collapses on the street from like an aneurysm or something. I can't remember what it was. But and he has nothing on him except maybe like a musician's union card or something. So he gets taken to kind of a public hospital, where I think he's sort of, this is, I don't know when this was, many, many decades ago. So, he was like almost treated as a pauper or an unidentified person or something. And they eventually find out where he is. And Oscar Hammerstein, who wrote the lyrics to this song, goes and sits at his side, Maybe by now he's been moved to an Upper East Side hospital. I don't know. I don't have all the details in shape. But what I do remember about this is that Hammerstein sat at what turned out to be Jerome Kern's deathbed and just holding his hand and comforting him and singing this song over and over again because he knew it was one of Kern's favorites, if not his favorite. And to me, that's such a tender image of these two great songwriters, one of them just trying to have the other one's last moments include a song that he loved and that he wrote. All right, so we need women to call up. The number, 888-720 That should be very easy. The aliens understand that. 888-720-WNPR. 888-720-9677. You can call up about anything. It doesn't have to be a burning issue. And when I say burning issue, it doesn't have to be about wildfires, although we do have a wildfire card call on the board, and we will get to that call. But I do think we have two major items of business that we have to deal with today. And so let's see. I think the first one will be we will name the asteroid. We will announce the asteroid of the day. And Kat, from music there, can you see A1? Can you just give me a little A1 and I'll fade it for you. So the asteroid of the day today, orbiting the sun at a distance of approximately 2 astronomical units, is 14846, known as Lampedusa. It's a 6-kilometer wide asteroid, and it's named after the Sicilian nobleman and one-time novelist, Giuseppe Tomasi de Lampedusa, who was an avid astronomer. But he also, towards the end of his life, at the very end of his life, he wrote a novel called The Leopard, Il Gattopardo, which also got made into a Visconti movie starring Burt Lancaster. And it's like this acclaimed novel, and he died right after. He just figured out near the end of his life that he wanted to be a novelist. So we're going to salute this asteroid. It's not doing anything other than being an asteroid. It's not menacing us. It was discovered, I think, in 1989 at l'Osservatorio San Vittore near Bologna. And it's known as Lampedusa. This is your day, Lampedusa. Enjoy your trip through outer space. And that is our asteroid of the day. All right, so how do you like that idea? Does that, I don't know, like maybe every 2 weeks we'll have an asteroid of the day. You know, there's an asteroid named after Willa Cather. It's very uneven who has asteroids named after them. Like Tom Swift has an asteroid, a fictional character. I guess there's sort of two Tom Swifts, Tom Swift Jr. But it's uneven. It's not like, all the great astronomers or something like that. Nothing like that. And then the other thing, I don't need music for this one. And then we'll go to your calls. By the way, it's Ask or Tell Me Anything. You can call up about something that has no more importance than a hill of beans or something very important. 888-720-WNPR. 888-720-9677. I also want to read my junk mail of the day, because I want to make a point about junk mail. I think I'm right about this. I think the old kind of junk mail from the Nigerian prince, that kind of thing, I think there's less and less of that. Correct me if you think I'm wrong. But for example, I have one today. I think it's a good idea to go into your junk mail anyway to see what's there. What is it? What's being filtered out? It might be something from your mother that just the algorithm didn't like it or something. So you should go in and see what's in there. It's mostly not very good stuff. But I go in there from time to time, and there was one of the old-fashioned, the old school, the OG type of junk mail, spam mail. It says, and I love this very much, "Hope you are doing so well. I need you to help me with a favor, but I am currently unavailable over the phone because I have a ruptured eardrum, and the doctor," it just says DR, "and the DR told me to stay away from phone calls for now. Let me know when you get this. Thank you." Well, first of all, you've only got one ruptured eardrum and you've got two eardrums. Why can't you hold on? You could absolutely. The doctor's not going to say, don't use either eardrum. That's not plausible. I mean, there are many things that are not plausible about this email, but I just sort of thought, particularly as all of you, by the way, if you're calling this show at 888-720-WNPR, 888-720-9677, and one of your eardrums is ruptured, don't hold it up to that one. Hold it up to the other one. But it's also hard for me to understand if you've already got a ruptured eardrum, what a phone call would do to hurt it. Oh, you better not do that. Don't go swimming, until after you've eaten. You have to wait an hour. All right. So those are some things, some stuff I got to get out of the way. In a little while, we're also going to say goodbye, a very sad goodbye to a very popular podcasting platform, which will go dormant tomorrow. All right, here's Charlie from Norwich. Hi, Charlie. You have the floor.
Hi, Colin. Thanks for taking my call. I have this theory, and other people probably might have it too, that because we killed off all the insects or are killing off the insects with sixth extinction, okay, that this is contributing to the wildfire problem, because the insects recycle the nutrients in nature and keep the cycle going. And without them, the cycle slows down and stops, and all the dead organic matter accumulates on the forest floor or in the grasslands or wherever.
Well,
so that's my theory.
I've never seen that anywhere, but obviously, outside the box, outside the coloring, outside the line theories are very welcome on Ask or Tell Me Anything. I don't think it's probably as clear a connection as you're making it sound like, because, for example, there's some ways in which fires are good for insects, and there are some insects that really like it when there's been a forest fire. They come in and do other things after that too. But I will look into that. I
think most insects that are involved in recycling the nutrients, sure, some are good with fire and some are not. But without any insects, then none of them are going to be good for anything.
Right. Well, if they burn to a crisp, absolutely, they will not be. But yeah, one thing it is true is first of all, it seems to me that here in this country, and ask any tree specialist, they'll tell you that the stuff that they're allowed to use these days is way milder and, just less aggressive and less dangerous to human beings than it used to be. But the guy who handles my trees when I have anything that needs to be handled, one thing that he said is people get freaked out. Like, I have an apple tree that's dying, and apple trees don't really sort of die on any particular schedule. They just start to not work so well anymore. And it's a really old apple tree. And I was standing there with Bruce, my tree guy, Bruce Graver, the tree saver. And he said, people see ants running into a tree like that and they freak out and they want us to spray it or something. He said, really, at this point for this tree, ants are doing it. It's kind of what that caller just said. The ants are good for the tree right now, to the extent that anything could be good for the tree. So, yeah, I think we have a weird idea that insects are inevitably bad for trees, which is not true. It's also probably true that are ants insects? I don't know. I always get confused about it. I know spiders aren't, right? I think ants are insects. Anyway, all right. So I'll take the bike riding call, and let's see. These are all interesting calls, but we have not had anyone with double X chromosomes call right now. So 888-720-WNPR, 888-720-9677. Here is Mike from Woodbury. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Colin. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So I'm not sure this is a hill of beans, maybe more like a knoll of beans.
A knoll of beans, a grassy knoll of beans. Okay.
Exactly. So I know I've gleaned from listening to the show that you like to ride your bicycle, as do I. Although I have a mountain bike, so I'm largely off-road. But when I am on the road, I think it's ridiculous that the law says that you have to ride your bike on the right side of the road, as if it's a vehicle. You're more like a pedestrian. You can't see traffic. You have to constantly looking over your shoulder to make sure somebody's not going to run into you. If you were on the left side of the road, you could see them coming, and you could take evasive action if necessary. And apparently this is the law in all 50 states, from what I can tell. And I just think it doesn't make sense.
Well, I've sort of stopped riding my bike, partly because of everything that we're talking about right now. I just decided it's just too dangerous. I was just knowing too many people who were getting hit, and sometimes dying and stuff like that. I will say, I'm not sure I entirely agree with you. And I'll give you an example because it's sitting not too far from where I'm sitting right now. So there's an exit to the parking lot where my car is parked in right now, where, in fact, I don't have I have to sort of clear a visual obstacle on my right-hand side. But I'm going to be pulling out of that parking lot and taking a right turn, mostly since I'm taking a right turn, what I'm doing is looking to my left because the cars that are driving on the right side of the road, which are the ones that I care about if I'm taking a right turn, are coming from that direction. So I'm looking left and I'll glance right. But I've certainly had the problem of not, because in fact you don't get a lot of time, a lot of visual to your right here in this turn, not picking up a bicyclist who's riding on the left side of the road. I think it's incredibly dangerous in that situation. A person who's taking a right turn is mainly looking to their left. That's where danger is going to come from. And I think it's very easy for them to not pick up you on their right. They're just not thinking about anybody being there. And they would probably notice a car, but they might not notice a little bicycle there. So that's why I'd say don't do it. That's just one person's opinion, and apparently the opinion of all 50 states. I mean, there's a reason for all that. I mean, look, I was a contributing editor to Bicycling magazine, and I rode bikes all over the place. And I rode bikes in Europe where it's a million times safer because people really don't want to hit you because you might be their grandfather because their grandfather rides bikes because everybody's does. And so do their grandchildren. Everybody rides bikes. So, I mean, it's just not very safe here. You want to be as safe as you possibly can. But cyclists kind of naturally start taking liberties with things and making up their own traffic rules and stuff like that. And it's going to lead to something bad eventually. All right. We actually do have a woman caller, but I'm going to take another break right now. This will be a very fast break. We'll come back. We'll take a couple more calls. We also have to have a brief memorial service for a podcasting platform.
The way it feels to be a hater. Something so sweet about thinking that I'm better. Just to wake up every morning, lay in bed and somehow never ever rise to the occasion or even hold up under pressure. But we all know that it doesn't even matter if I waste away and no one thinks I'm clever. Just as long as I've got my
And our technical producer today is, as usual, Kat Pastor, the person who's producing, taking your calls, all that kind of stuff. That's Mr. Jonathan McPants. Thanks to both of them. This is Ask or Tell Me Anything. And I've said all day that we need a woman to call up, and someone has answered the bell here. This is, I think, Dina. Is it Dina? It's Dina. Yeah, okay, Dina in Stores. And
Hi.
You have the floor.
Oh, my gosh. I'm just irritated with something linguistically. A lot of the students that I deal with sometimes are like, they ask questions. It sounds like they're asking questions, but they're not. It's like, well, the wasp nest was upstairs, and then my friend saw it. And so it's like an upspeak at the end of things. And then while they're talking as well, they say right in between things. But they don't want me to tell them if it's right or not. They're just kind of saying it. So it's like, do you not know what a question is, or do I? It's very confusing.
Right. And the oddest thing about uptalking has been around now, been a pretty major phenomenon for about 30 years minimum, I think. But my favorite thing about uptalking is when you say, where are you from? And they say, New Hampshire? Yeah. It's like, are you not sure where you're from? You're just taking a guess? This is kind of shot in the dark. I might be from New Hampshire. And
I think it's more a female thing a lot of times, but like at Wesleyan, when I work down there, it's the men do it too.
Well, that's because Wesleyan's all about equality. It's about erasing, those kinds of arbitrary distinctions. So everybody's going to uptalk. It's not just a girl thing. I think the right thing is, it's not a disfluency exactly, but it's. I think some linguists would call it spacing. Yeah. So I'm talking to you about this, and Dina, I agree a lot with the question you asked, right? And now I'm probably going to take somebody else's call, right? And that's just sort of a way, I think it's a way of spacing. If you watch, for example, if you were to rewatch the Republican debate from Wednesday night, you can hear a lot of them doing various kinds of spacing because they're not quite sure what they're going to say, and they want to have a little extra time, but they don't want to have a long, silent pause. So they space. They space, yeah. Anyway, I know it can be annoying. We all are watching the deterioration of language, but language will survive us. It will be okay. Okay, so now it's time, because we planned this. We talked about this in a meeting, so we will definitely do something if we talked about it in a meeting. So, Kat, here I will need the music known as A2, briefly here. So some of you listen to our show on a platform called Stitcher. A platform that was a dream of some people who made a platform. I have to sound more serious. A dream of some people who made a platform for podcasts that would work on Android phones for all the people whose messages are green when you get them on your iPhone in their little green bubble. It's those people. That's who Android was made for those. Stitcher was made for those people, the Android people. Anyway, Stitcher was acquired by Deezer and then Midroll Media over the years. But SiriusXM bought the company for $325 million in 2020 and has now decided it doesn't want it. Sirius wants to develop its own podcasting thing and call it Sirius. And so tomorrow, for those of you who listen to our podcast or any podcast on Stitcher, I believe tomorrow, either today is the last day or tomorrow is the last day. It's hard to know when they see something's going to end on August 29th. Does that mean it's not there tomorrow? It's the kind of thing I would ask the aliens after they finished watching Matlock. All right, so anyway, that's we can anyway, goodbye, Stitcher. Goodbye. You've given a lot of people a lot of wonderful podcasting hours, and we will miss you. All right, we have Dave from New London. This will be the last call of the day, and I know you have kind of a big topic you want to bring up, and you have very little time to do it. So here we go. Dave, you have the floor.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine.
Lately, for the last few years, because of the political climate and so on and so forth, one of the big things we keep hearing is that, our democracy's on the ropes, we're in trouble. I prefer to see it another way. Yes, our democracy is not perfect, and there's a lot of things that we need to seize these moments as we see things happen to target, okay, this is something we need to fix, and we need to fix that, and so on and so forth. However, I think if anything, what we're going through now is really going to show how strong democracy is. And I go back to that scene in the Apollo 13 where everybody's scrambling because of the emergency, and a couple people says, hey, man, this could be the biggest tragedy to our program, space program. And the director of the mission, he said, on the contrary, if anything, this is going to show how solid and how strong we are. And
well,
sort of sounding naive, I believe the same thing with our democracy.
Right. I think that's a legitimate way to feel about it. I mean, certainly, the biggest challenge to our democracy, and I'm sure this is what you're referring to, is what did happen with the results of the 2020 election. And there were 60 court challenges made by the Trump team, 59 and a half of which were unsuccessful. It didn't matter who appointed the judge. Trump could have appointed the judge. The judges did what they were supposed to do. They rejected a spurious claim of tampering or rigged election results. Then you had an effort to overturn the election that is the nut of the case that is going to go to trial on March 4th. And that is the creating of spurious electors who were willing to sign statements saying that they represented the votes of Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia, and that they were going to cast those votes for a person who did not win any of those states. And, really kind of who knows? I mean, Mike Pence played an important role. And maybe if Rudy Giuliani had been vice president, this whole thing would have stretched out even further and then would have wound up back in the courts. And, I don't even really know exactly how that plays out. It certainly takes a longer time to get to the proper result. But, we came so close to something that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. I'm not quite as optimistic as Dave is, but I am optimistic that the show is over. We have to say goodbye. Thanks to everybody who listened.
The number you have reached has been disconnected.